So in the second step, as far as having the ideal file flow and process, I want to talk to the originators, right? Because for me to get into what assistants and processors and underwriters and all that, I mean, we'd be here for hours. So let's just speak to originators, right? Like, how do you do this? And how do we set our flow up to where I can do more loans? Because that's kind of the goal. And that's one of the reasons you're watching this, is because you want to pick up some ideas, some tidbits on how can I get more business, right? I'll probably later on do another piece for operations, but for now, let's speak to originators and say, okay, what should I be doing? Well, in my opinion, the actual loan officer, the originator, should take the first call. You can't pass that off, right? This is the first impression clients are going to have of you and your business. And so you need to be responsible for that. So if a client calls and wants to start the pre-approval process or wants to look into a refinance, you need to be the one that takes that call. Now, I don't mean you answer every phone call every single second. You have 3 people on hold at the same time. It just means you need to have that original conversation. You need to find out their specifics, their details, their goals, asking all the right questions, which I'm sure we already all do. But I think it's very imperative that you don't have an assistant or a junior loan officer handle that first call, because you want to get a scope of things. You want to be able to take notes, get a picture of what they really want. And then at that point is when you can turn it over to an assistant, a junior, something along those lines, to get the application, to have the 1003 filled out, to have documents sent back and put into an e-folder or a file or a Dropbox or whatever you're going to use. But I think the biggest thing is the originator has to have that first call. You also need to have a place to database these, because if somebody doesn't turn things over right away, how do you know when to follow up with them, right? How do you remember a conversation you had 6 months ago? So that's also where you look at an assistant or a junior entering in all the notes from your conversation, what their goals are, what it's looking like. So you now have a clear picture that when Sally calls you back from 90 days ago, what was that conversation about? Oh, yeah, that's right. She was getting this and she was going to do that. And you have a clear idea in your database as far as all the notes and all the pertinent information. So let's now say you've had the call, the assistant followed up, got the application in. This is where the originator needs to step back in. Start really looking at the file, right? And I don't mean underwrite and I don't mean calculate income, but just saying, okay, they are W-2'd like she said. She makes about the same amount they said. They're not self-employed. There's not a ton of 2106 expenses or any of those little things that can bite up and grab you. And that's really when the originator, I think, needs to drill in and say, okay, let me create 3 or 4 different scenarios based on what the clients had talked about. Maybe they gave you a price range of X amount to Y amount. We'll work up a couple scenarios in there so they can see the bottom end of the range and the top end of the range. Work up a fixed and an ARM. You want to create some scenarios for people and get those sent out to them so they have a really good idea of everything out there. If all you do is put together a 30-year fixed at the highest price point they said and send that over, guess what? That's going to be all the client thinks you can offer. They're not going to have many questions, and they're going to attribute, oh, Regan's program is. And 30 days from now, somebody else is talking to him and says, well, did you consider this? They're going to be like, well, Regan doesn't even have that program because he only gave me the one. That's not what you want to do. Even if they're not going to use the other 2 or 3 scenarios, who cares? What you're doing is you're giving them options, you're giving them ranges, and you're showing that there's a lot available and you're here to guide them through that process, right? Sometimes working up a scenario that you know isn't going to work out isn't bad because it shows why you didn't present that to them to begin with or why you don't recommend it. It gives them a kind of a focal point or a baseline of like, this is one option, but Regan's recommending this, and you now all of a sudden look like the expert that you are. So let's just say now you've got these scenarios out. You've put your time, you've got 3 or 4 of them out there. The originator also needs to be doing follow-up. I know it's crazy, and a lot of times coaching programs or things will say, oh, well, that's where you turn it over, right? You only do the most important aspects. And I don't think so, right? Because when you're originating, the highest dollar amount that you can earn is when you close a loan. You don't get paid for pulling credit reports or running DUs. It's when loans close. Well, how do you get loans to close? Well, you build rapport. You have clients that really see value in what you offer. And if you're never talking to them, if you talk to them at application and then you send them an email, some scenarios, they don't know what your value is. It's through the follow-up, through the answering of questions, that people start to understand why you're a valuable person to have in their corner and on their team when you're looking at buying a house or refinancing. And so I like that the originator needs to follow up. Even if it's just a quick email, hey, I was thinking about you guys. I know that you may not have found the right house yet, but when that time comes, let me know. Or if you ever want to refresh your scenarios or look at new price points, that's what I'm here for. That's a great follow-up. It doesn't take that long, and that's why I want to put it onto the originator. The last thing that I also want to put onto the originator is when somebody's in contract or somebody's making the offer. Now, the loan officer doesn't have to send the pre-approval piece of paper to the realtor, but the originator should be involved in that part of the process. Why? Because you want to make sure that you're stepping in when things are about to go down. I mean, it's about to get in contract. You don't want to be off in the corner and letting your staff kind of do this. You want to take control of that. And there might be an instance where the offer doesn't get accepted because they were $5,000 short. But if the originator was involved, you could look at your client and say, hey, for $5,000, it's only going to change your payment by $6 a month or whatever it ends up being. Or you could cover it, split the difference, and you could figure out a way to all of a sudden, your client's like, yeah, I can go $5,000 more in this offer and be totally comfortable. That's why I want the originator involved at that stage. And then the final stage is once it's in contract. The originator should be on the phone with the client doing a sit down or a meeting in the office saying, okay, you're in contract at this. We have this as far as our contingency period, this as far as our close of escrow period. And you need to really set the stage, give the game plan, set the expectations of this is how we're going to close you on time, be ahead of the game, and have no stress. This is where you're also going to confirm how much do you want to put down, the pros and cons of putting less or more. This is exactly what your rate will be. This is exactly what your payment will be. Because in a perfect process, the second that you confirm that and you lock the interest rate, and you turn it over to your team to do loan disclosures, get title fees, gather documents, all that kind of stuff, that is when you step out. That's when the originator is no longer involved in the process, other than a couple minor things I'll talk about in a second. But you have to really set that up and spend the time from that first phone call till there to be able to truly pass the baton or hand it over and say, I'm done, you guys take care of it. Too many times when people are doing transactions, they never set expectations. People don't know that, hey, I got 14-day contingency. I really need to get disclosures done right away because you never had time to do that. You're so all over the board shotgun approaching it, it doesn't work out. So to me, if you follow this process, same every time, you do the same task, and when you have that call when they're in escrow and you lock the rate, that's when you turn it over. And after you've turned it over, this is where the trust comes in. You got to trust your people, your team, and the rest of the process that you've created. It will take it through closing. And the only time the originator should step back in at that point is for, I call them milestone opportunities, or opportunities to generate more referrals. So the first step is loan approval. Hey, loan gets approved. That's a great time. Everybody's happy. It takes away some fear. I like to, at that point, as the originator, call the client. Right? You can call and say, hey, congratulations, your loan's approved. We knew it was going to happen, but I just wanted to kind of give you that peace of mind, put you at ease that we're going to be closing. There's a few minor things my team's going to reach out to you for, but everything's great. The other thing you can do is reach out to the real estate agents on that at that time. Hey, so-and-so, I know that you're the listing agent on this transaction. A lot of times listing agents don't have much insight into what's going on as far as the buyer. But in this situation, I want to let you know the buyers are fully approved now. I know we're 6 days ahead of the contingency, but we have the full approval and everything should be smooth from here. How impressed do you think that listing agent is? How likely when you ask that listing agent to go get coffee later on are they? Pretty likely. Right now, most loan originators have nothing to do with this. They don't hit milestones. They don't follow up. They don't allow their existing pipeline and the clients in process to generate more business. And that's a key component of being a loan officer or originator. The next thing is when you get your clear to close. If you get a clear to close, you better be calling the client and you better be calling the agents and you better be, this is kind of like your time to pat yourself on the back. Right? I mean, this is the time where you can really shine because most of the time, loan officers, they don't ever have the opportunity to shine. They're kind of the guy off in the corner, kind of like an escrow officer that the agents look at and say, oh, well, he's just part of the transaction. Well, hey, if you get clear to close 10 days before close of escrow, looks pretty good, pretty impressive. that's when you need to jump in and call the agents. You need to call escrow, say everything's clear to close. My team's going to touch base to kind of guide us through the end, but I just want to give you the great news. And then obviously the final thing is after closing. The way that I have it set up is as soon as clients close, everything's funded, my team sets up what I like to do, a closing call, usually anywhere from 2 to 5 days after the actual closing. You don't want to do it the day of. I know a lot of times loan officers or originators want to do it the day they close. Hey, you just funded, let's call and go over everything. Man, people are getting keys, they're packing boxes, they got movers, they got enough going on. Even if you do pin them down, they're not going to remember anything you said. So I always say, can we schedule a time? I schedule it out. What time can we do this? Anywhere from 2 to 5 days after the actual closing. And when you do that, you can't just call them and say, hey, you're closed. Yeah, duh, I mean, they are closed. They got their keys, right? You need to have a list. And I have this about 10-point checklist that I go through on my closing call. And it goes over, if you're in a state that has supplemental property tax, it goes over what those are, how to make their first payment, when they should expect stuff in the mail, go over all the junk mail that people get as soon as they close, for people that want to sell a mortgage, life insurance, or scam them out of $50 here and there. Go over that stuff. Right? Because this is the last chance you're going to be able to add value. Yeah, you added value, you gave them a great process and got them a loan, but this is the last chance you're going to have them be able to add value. And this is the last impression you're going to get for them for a while. So make it a good one. Make it a detailed one. Make it one that you care, because that's how your clients are going to continue to refer you business over and over and over again. Okay? So to me, from an origination standpoint, that lays out exactly kind of what the perfect process should look like, and it should be repeated every single time. Because if you do it every single time the exact same way, you're going to be able to originate most of your day, and at the same time, you're going to free up a ton of time and have clear expectations for yourself, for your team, and it's also something that is scalable. Okay? That's the last piece, is scalability. When you do what we just went over, you can expand that. You can have additional loan officers underneath you. You can take certain parts away by adding another employee or another staff member and still stick with the, the nuts and bolts and the meats and potatoes of what you need to do as an originator. If you're shotgun approaching it, it has limitations. If you're doing purely transactions, it has limitations. You can't scale it. But when you build a business and you do it like I just said, you're going to be able to actually scale this, make it bigger, and I guarantee any of the top originators in this country will say the exact same thing, and they have a process, if it's not identical, very, very similar, because that's how it works. There's no secret sauce in the mortgage industry. It's the same thing, the same fundamentals, with everybody's own little different spin. So hope you guys took something from this. Any questions, obviously let me know, post a comment, send me a note. More than happy to answer them. And that's all I got for today. Hope you're having a good one.